They gave you peace. It was a gentle, quiet thing. It settled over humanity like a warm blanket. You remember the day the treaty was signed. The elder, one stood tall and serene. Their silver robes seemed to drink the light. They spoke of an end to conflict, a new age of shared knowledge. They asked for only one thing in return: your warships, every last destroyer, every carrier and dreadnought. They called them relics of a barbaric past, tools you would no longer need. You were an admiral then. You watched your fleet power down for the last time. You saw the pride in your crew's eyes curdle into doubt. The price for this perfect peace felt too high. You retired to a quiet moon. You watched the star lanes grow safe and predictable. Humanity prospered under their guidance. Yet a cold knot of suspicion never left your gut. You knew peace bought with teeth is no peace at all. It is a leash. The first whispers came from the fringe. The outer colonies went quiet one by one. Their weekly data streams turned to static. Then, nothing. Official reports from the elder ones were calm. They spoke of ion storms, of communication buoy malfunctions, standard deep space troubles. You read the reports in your study. The language was too precise, the explanations too neat. You saw the careful omissions, the fleet movements they tried to hide. You still had old contacts, old backdoors into the network. You pulled up the raw data yourself. Patrol wings of their starships were moving. They were moving toward the fringe worlds. They were not rescue missions. The energy signatures were all wrong. One night, a single packet of data slipped through. It was fragmented and heavily damaged. Just a few frames of video. A farming moon, rich and green. Then, a sky filled with silver ships. The recording ended in a flash of white light. A light you knew all too well. It was the signature of a world killer. The news called it the Purge of Terra Nova. They said it was a tragic necessity. A fast-spreading biological agent had infected the system. Sterilization was the only humane option. They showed curated clips of their ships, delivering what they called a cleansing fire. They broadcast it on every channel, a spectacle of sorrowful power. You watched from your balcony overlooking a placid sea. You knew their weapon systems by heart. The beams that scoured Terra Nova were not for plagues. They were for erasing civilizations. This was not a quarantine. It was a message, a warning to anyone who might dream of independence. You felt a cold rage you had not felt in 30 years. They were showing humanity what happened to dissent. They were demonstrating the cage you all lived in. It was a gilded cage, yes, but its bars were forged from starfire. You knew then that the whispers were true, and the silence was a scream. A forgotten terminal in your study flickered to life. It was an old military-issue relic, caked in dust and disuse. Its screen glowed with a single, sharp emblem, a striking eagle clutching a lightning bolt. It was the insignia of High Command, an office that no longer existed. You ran your hand over the cold metal. A single line of text appeared. It was a code you thought long buried. The last directive. Humanity's final, desperate contingency plan. The message was simple. Commander, you are recalled. Protocol Chimera is active. Your heart hammered against your ribs. The old soldier inside you woke from a long slumber. You typed your authentication code. The muscle memory was still there. The floor of your study hissed open. A small transport platform rose to meet you. There were no grand speeches, no calls to glory, just a quiet summons from the ghosts of the past. Humanity's secret fleet was waiting, and it needed its commander. The transport descended into the moon's core. It connected to a hidden transit tube. The journey was silent and fast. You emerged in a vast cavern, a hidden command center carved into Ganymede. The air hummed with power. Dozens of officers in old Earth Navy uniforms snapped to attention. They were the children and grandchildren of your former crews, the keepers of the secret. A massive view screen ignited before you. It showed the Sol system in real time. But it revealed things no public chart ever would. Hollowed-out asteroids teeming with activity. Deep core shipyards humming under the ice of Europa. Secret installations hidden in the Kuiper Belt. For 30 years, they had been building. You watched as the ghosts came online. Shipyards long dormant flared with light. Dry docks opened to reveal sleek, deadly vessels. These were not the bulky ships of your time. They were predators, built with stolen and improved designs. They were made for one purpose. A war they promised you was over. The screen labeled the new fleet, Aegis. Your new flagship was named the Vengeance. It was a blade in the darkness, a ship designed to hit hard and vanish. Your first target was the Cygnus Arm, a major patrol route for the Elder Ones. Their third vigilance fleet kept the peace there. You knew that meant they crushed any colony that got too ambitious. They were arrogant, complacent. They expected to fight miners with converted freighters. You did not use the standard jump lanes. Your ships rode gravitic currents, a dangerous and unpredictable form of travel. It allowed you to appear in the heart of their formation. One moment there was empty space. The next, 30 human warships surrounded them. Their shields were not even fully charged. They never stood a chance. Their fleet expected to crush a minor revolt. You showed them how humanity handles betrayal. Your ships fired as one. Lances of pure energy carved through their hulls. Torpedoes found their unarmored reactor cores. It was not a battle. It was an execution. A statement written in fire and vacuum. You left one of their ships alive. A wounded messenger to carry the tale. With the patrol fleet gone, you seized their primary comms buoy, a massive installation that relayed messages across the sector. Your technicians sliced through their encryption in minutes. It was laughably outdated. The Empire had grown lazy in its power. You now had a voice that could reach half the galaxy. It was time to tell the truth. Your face appeared on screens across a dozen systems, on bridge view screens and public news terminals. You stood on the deck of the Vengeance. Behind you, the wreckage of their fleet drifted. You did not shout. You did not posture. You simply spoke. You laid out the history of their quiet subjugation, the truth of the Gilded Cage. You showed them the unedited footage from the Fringe, the raw data from the purge of Terra Nova. You transmitted the energy signatures of their world killers. You offered the galaxy a simple choice. Continue to live under the shadow of your masters, or stand with humanity. The broadcast ended with a single image. The old flag of Earth. Freedom or the old masters. The line was drawn. The Empire's response was swift and absolute. They called you pirates, terrorists. They denied every accusation. But their actions spoke louder than their words. They assembled their Grand Armada, the pride of their entire military, over 500 capital ships, a force of overwhelming power. They moved from their core worlds toward you, a wave of silver and gold intent on scrubbing you from existence. They broadcast their intentions openly. They wanted everyone to see their might, to understand the futility of resistance. They believed that overwhelming force could solve any problem. It was the only logic they truly understood. You watched their fleet gather on your tactical display. A lesser commander would have been terrified. You just felt a grim satisfaction. They were finally taking you seriously. Your fleet was fast. Theirs was powerful but slow. You would not meet them head-on. That was their game, not yours. Instead, you would break their spine. You targeted their shield worlds, a series of fortress systems that protected their inner territory. These worlds generated the energy fields that guarded their core. They were the lock on the door to their home. The first was a gas giant called Xylos. Its moons were armed with planet-sized railguns. Your fleet jumped in close. Too close for their guns to track. You deployed Marines in daring boarding actions. They took the control stations. They turned the massive weapons on each other. The fortress moon shattered its twin. The victory was a deep, surgical cut. You moved from one shield world to the next. You were a phantom they could not catch. Each victory was broadcast on your new channels. Each triumph reminded the galaxy of one simple fact. Humans do not forget. Humans do not forgive betrayal. The shield network that had protected them for centuries was crumbling, and they were beginning to feel fear. Your declaration of truth had planted a seed. Your victories were the water that made it grow. On a dusty mining world, the enslaved Cathar rose up. They used their heavy excavation tools to tear down their overseers' garrisons. They raised a banner of broken chains. They transmitted a simple message to your fleet. We fight with you. Soon, others followed. The Groll, a species of gentle giants, seized an armory. They had been forced to build weapons for the Empire. Now they used those weapons for their own liberation. Rebellions ignited on a dozen different worlds, small sparks of courage turning into a galactic fire. The Empire was no longer fighting a rogue human fleet. They were fighting a revolution. You were winning battles with ships, but you knew the war would be won with an idea. Your intelligence teams had been digging. They had analyzed the data from a captured ship's library, and they found the Empire's deepest, darkest secret, the truth of its origin. The Elder, ones presented themselves as ancient, wise rulers, a species that had achieved perfection. This was a lie. They had been uplifted by a precursor race, a benevolent species that had guided their evolution. But the Elder, ones grew jealous and fearful. They turned on their creators. They wiped them from history. They built their empire on the bones of their own benefactors. This truth was your ultimate weapon, not a torpedo, but a revelation. You broadcast it everywhere. The effect was catastrophic for the Empire. Their authority was built on a divine right to rule, the idea that they were the galaxy's natural leaders. This truth shattered that illusion. Their own people began to question. Their own commanders hesitated. The logic of their lies was unraveling, and with it, their power. Their grand armada began to fracture. Some ships returned home to quell riots. Others simply stopped responding to orders. The time had come. With their empire in chaos, you made the final push. The human fleet, now joined by ships from new allies, gathered. Cathar destroyers flew beside Groll cruisers. You gave the order. A coordinated jump to their home system, a place called Radiance. The system was defended, but its fleet was in disarray. Their resolve was broken. Your fleet emerged from the jump. The star Radiance filled your view screen. And before you, the throne world, a planet of impossible beauty, and a sky filled with the enemy. The final battle for the future was at hand. Your ships surged forward, a tide of steel and conviction. You aimed for the heart, the citadel of the Elder, ones. Your ships punched a hole in their defensive line. The battle raged in the upper atmosphere of the throne world. The sky burned with energy beams and explosions. You led a strike team yourself. You boarded a shuttle and descended through the chaos. You landed in the central plaza of their capital city. The architecture was breathtaking. The silence was unnerving. You fought your way to their citadel, a spire of white stone that touched the clouds. Your Marines were efficient. They disabled the guards with precision. You did not want a massacre. You wanted a reckoning. You breached the doors to the throne room. You found the Elder Ones. They were not imposing gods. They were frail, thin beings, floating in elaborate biochairs. They still believed you could be reasoned with. They offered you power. They offered you a place at their side. You looked at the ancient being before you, the leader of a galactic empire, and you saw nothing but a tired, old liar. Your answer was a cold, hard no. Outside, the battle was ending. The last of their loyalist fleet was surrendering. The war was over. Their empire was broken. A debt had come due. The surviving Elder Ones stood before you, stripped of their finery, their biochairs powered down. They offered you their unconditional surrender. They begged for mercy. The same mercy they denied Terra Nova. The same mercy they refused the Fringe Worlds. Your first officer looked at you. The entire fleet waited for your command. The fate of an entire species was in your hands. You did not choose extermination. That was their way, not yours. You ordered them into custody. They would face a galactic trial for their crimes. There would be justice, not vengeance. This was the first act of a new age, an age built on something other than fear. You now stand before a new galactic council. It meets not in a grand citadel, but in a repurposed space station. Representatives from dozens of worlds are here. Humans, Cathar, Grohl, and even some races from the old empire. There are no thrones, just a round table. You look at the faces around you. You see hope. You see exhaustion. But most of all, you see resolve. You lay out the terms of the new charter. Not a treaty of dominance, but a pact of mutual defense. Free trade, open communication, an end to secrets and lies. There would be peace, but it would be a peace guarded by a united fleet, a peace maintained by those who remembered its terrible cost. You look out at the stars. This time, peace would be built on strength and truth. It would be a peace bought with interest, paid in full.